AEW Wrestledream is now in the books. I watched it. Did you watch it? Well, let's talk about it. So, Wrestledream happened this past Saturday, and there wasn't as many matches as I originally thought. Looking at the card on Wikipedia, it said that it had 13 matches, but I believe it was like 5 of those that were on the pre-show, the 0 hour. And because they ran so long on the pre-show, the tag team match between Jet Speed and FTR ran into the opening of the pay-per-view itself, which I honestly did not have a problem with. I know that there were some people that were critical of that bleeding into. I remember when I initially tuned in to check it out, I was running a little bit late, like about 3 minutes behind. And when I checked it out, it was like mid-match. And I was like, oh, when did this pay-per-view start? Did I miss the start date? Which was nice, but I like how, back when WWF used to have free-for-alls, they would have a 30-minute free-for-all, which was free on pay-per-view, and then after it would click over for pay-per-view, you had to pay for the rest. And there were times where something was going on right at the end of the free-for-all, and it gave you an incentive to tune in to find out the result. I remember as a kid being very, very excited about something that would happen on the free-for-all that led into the pay-per-view, and I was excited about trying to figure out the conclusion. So I spent the majority of the time, like the 5 minutes before the pay-per-view, trying to get my mom to buy the pay-per-view. Okay, so there is a good reason behind doing something like that I did not have a problem with, mostly because of my silly memory and how I remember those moments from back when I was a kid and I was scrounging to try to get mom to buy a pay-per-view of something that I was interested in. So I didn't mind that at all. FTR won that match, by the way, but I did not watch enough of that match to determine whether or not that was a great match or not. It looked completely fine. It looked, there was a nice callback to Bobby Heenan on The Ultimate Warrior, where I believe it was WrestleMania 5. Don't quote me on that or anything like that, but in WrestleMania 5, I believe the Ultimate Warrior was pinned because Bobby Heenan held his feet while he was going for a press slam, and his opponent ended up landing on him, and then Bobby Heenan held his feet down. Now, I can't remember exactly who his opponent was, and something about that I feel like should have been Rick Rude or something like that, but I don't remember. So if you guys do remember that match that I'm speaking of where Bobby Heenan held Ultimate Warrior's feet down, was it WrestleMania? Was it WrestleMania 5? And who was his opponent? Go ahead and leave that down in the comments. But that was a nice callback, something that I remembered from back in the day. Establishes Stokely Hathaway as the type of manager that's going to do whatever it takes to get the job done for his tag team. Didn't mind that in the slightest. The next match, the opening match, was Jamie Hayter against Tekla. These two really worked together well, and I had no reason to believe that they weren't going to work together really well, considering they both came from the same area, which was Stardom in Japan. They both cut their teeth out there in that company. Different eras, but the same idea applied. And at one point, Tekla hit an amazing high crossbody off the top rope to the outside onto Jamie Hayter, right in front of Luthez's wife, which I thought was an amazing spot. These two really work in accordance with one another. The chemistry was there. I'd like to see more from these two. If you work these two into certain scenarios, they can be at the top of the AEW women's division in no time. I thought this was a great opener. I will say one thing about this match, as a little aside. I know Tekla's gear was inspired by the Japanese theme that was presented in the show, honoring Antonio Inoki and such. But her look is grungy, and I would have liked to see her in like denim and leather style attire. Not exactly like a denim jacket and cut off jeans or anything like that. But, something that was in that style, because I think it fit her overall character a little bit more. Something weird, something that, nothing to quibble about, just something that I noticed that I thought I'd mention. She's very intense, she's got a lot of chaos, and she seems like super grungy, like rock grungy, and I would have liked to see that. Other than that, no problems with this match at all. I thought it established the event going into the rest of the card. Great way to open the match. I think they gave it like 15 minutes or something. It was fine for what it was. The Jurassic Express defeated the Young Bucks for $500,000 in their tag team match. This match went over 20 minutes. The outcome, in my opinion, was never in question. They did a really hilarious entrance for the Bucks where they played on the video wall insufficient funds. They had like $32 or whatever like that left in their account, but I guess that's considered broke. Which, I mean, I guess it is, but so they come out, and of course they got a lot riding on this match, including their future. They definitely spend way too much money, and I think they showed like a brief bank statement of what they were spending on. They got some spending problems, man. They got to get like an accountant or somebody that's coming together and finding out what they should or shouldn't spend, at least in kayfabe. The match was fine for what it was. Of course, there's going to be some chemistry between Jack Perry and the Young Bucks, knowing that they've worked together for as long as they've worked together. And like I said, the outcome was never in question. This wasn't an exciting, outstanding match that I would just throw like 5, pythons at or whatever, Hulk Hogan pythons at or anything like that. But it was good in furthering the story idea that apparently Jack Perry and Young Bucks aren't as distant as they would like us to believe. I know Jack Perry was coming back saying that the Young Bucks turned on him, but there definitely seems to be some like love there still. There's Jack Perry felt bad after winning the match and wanted to give them money. And then they got attacked by the Don Callis compound, and the Young Bucks looked like they were initially going to step in. They definitely did not join in on the beatdown, which is a clear indication that we're going to eventually see the Young Bucks join back up with the elite, the true elite. And I'll get to that a little bit later. So they're leaving, and then Kenny Omega comes out to get his appearance for the evening on the pay-per-view. And he's calling on the Young Bucks to come in and help. The Young Bucks do not help, and they've turned down any cash assistance that Jack Perry was willing to give him at this point. So then Kenny Omega runs down, clears house. So we are setting up for the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega to eventually reunite. I feel like we're on the precipice of that happening, and I like this actually. It deserves a bit more dialogue, in my opinion, to explain why Kenny Omega forgives Jack Perry and why Jack Perry feels so bad for the Young Bucks. I mean, it's not really established. A simple backstage segment or segments, I think, would suffice. AEW doesn't have to do basic math with their storylines. I don't expect them to, because they want to differentiate themselves from the WWE product, which pretty much gives us all of the bullet points of what's going on in the story. They leave nothing to the imagination, whereas I feel like AEW leaves a lot to the imagination. And I think it would be beneficial if they don't leave it to us to connect the dots, and that's all I'm saying. I mean, don't give us our own paths to take and theorize what's going to happen. We do that anyways, especially this guy over here. I fantasy book my heart out. I do it all the time, whether I'm recording it or whether I'm at home. So don't leave it up to me. Give me some explanation about what is going on, and don't leave it so much of a mystery. I don't have time, like some of the AEW fans, to sit there and connect the dots like Charlie Day on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia in the basement of the post office, finding the conspiracy of what's going on with the missing mail. I don't have time for all of that, nor do I have time to read everybody else's theories and comments about what's going on. So, yeah, at some point they've got to, I don't want them to spoon feed us necessarily, but like I said, like a little backstage segment where Jack Perry's explaining that he still has love for the Young Bucks, but they're going to have to learn their way the hard way. The same with Kenny Omega. If he were able to establish something backstage to explain why he is seemingly trying to get the band back together and so trusting of Jack Perry after being so apprehensive about Jack Perry coming back into the fold and even working with him to go against the Don Callis compound, that would be nice. But I do think in the future, what we're going to be seeing is eventually the Elite against the Don Callis compound in some form. And I think the Elite would be Kenny Omega, Hangman Adam Page, the Young Bucks, Jack Perry, and maybe even Luchasaurus against 6 of the 15 members of the Don Callis compound. So they should stretch that out. They should be in no rush to make that happen right away. You even have a chance to stretch that out until next year, where you have Blood and Guts, if they so choose. And I'm okay with that. I think this is a very intriguing storyline that they have here. I'm not in a rush to see the Young Bucks be good guys again necessarily, fan favorites again, but if done right, I think it could be interesting. Just like as they were leaving, just a quick aside, as they were leaving, it looked like they wanted to come back into the ring. The crowd was not into them coming back to the ring. You did not catch the crowd going, go, save them, save them. No. They definitely were not expecting that to happen, nor were they interested. Now, if you do that 3 or 4 or even 5 more times, and then on the 5th time, it looks like the Bucks are going to go back to save the day, now you've got the crowd hook, line, and sinker. And I think they buy into that moment when it does happen, and you could blow the roof off the place if you give it that time and space and breathing. That's all I'm saying. Delving forward, we've got the Hurt Syndicate defeating The Demand in a Tornado Trios match. MVP getting the revenge, and Ricochet getting the comeuppance for MVP being pinned last time was kind of the overall story arc that we were seeing here, the storyline progression. Personally, if you go back and watch my predictions for this event, I did not expect to see that. I did not expect to see the Hurt Syndicate get the victory here. What I was expecting was the Demand to find a way to get a win. But, heel tactics, locking MVP in a closet somewhere, whatever it would have been, or even Lashley and Benjamin would have actually made more sense. And then them triple teaming on MVP. That would have been something that I would have thought was going to happen. However, the Hurt Syndicate do get the win here because I think in their mind, they wanted the Hurt Syndicate to challenge for the trios titles, so they had to give them the win here. It wasn't about giving the Demand a loss. More so, it was to put the Hurt Syndicate in a situation where they were top contenders for the trios titles. And I think that idea may have had precedent over whether or not to really fully get behind the Demand as a serious team. And I'll get to why that trios match will now make more sense because of a decision that they made, which I'll get to later on. And if you have not seen Wrestledream, stick around and I'll fully explain why they decided to go with the Hurt Syndicate winning. Now, I'm not saying that was a good idea by any stretch of the imagination. Like I said, my prediction was the Demand to win, if only to establish the Demand a little bit more before the Hurt Syndicate come in and wipe them out. I thought, and they've had like 6 or 7 matches already in various forms of combat, whether it be singles, tag team, or 6-man, and all types of gimmick matches in between. But I would have given them a little bit more of a victory here for the Demand in this regard before you have the Hurt Syndicate come in and seemingly finish them for good. Although we know this is by no means the end of this program. And I believe once the Hurt Syndicate win the trios titles, or at least get really close to winning, and then the Demand interferes, we will see more from these 6 gentlemen. Delving forward, Kyle Fletcher defeats Mark Briscoe for the TNT Championship, to retain his TNT Championship, rather. This went almost a half an hour. It was a really great matchup. There was the story going in. Mark Briscoe had been wanting to challenge Kyle Fletcher for the TNT Championship. He got distracted by several other ideas and programs that were going on around that time. So this is finally his opportunity to win the TNT Championship. I feel like they reverse engineered this whole program. They could have done Mark Briscoe against Kyle Fletcher later on towards the end of the year, and they could have had Mark Briscoe challenge Hangman Adam Page while Kyle Fletcher defends against Samoa Joe. I would have liked that, but it seems like they had an idea about Samoa Joe, which I will get into later, which is why they went that route more so than the route that I was suggesting, or at least thinking that they would have gone, which I stated in the predictions for Wrestledream. Kyle Fletcher needed this win because they are trying to establish him as an upper 2 main event type of performer. They need that because they are very thin in the heel side on the main event, challenger side. So they needed Kyle Fletcher to gain his momentum and to actually build him up and to establish him as a serious threat to the AEW World Championship and just the overall main event picture for the fan favorites. So him winning here was never in doubt, in my opinion. But Mark Briscoe gave him a great match and did a phenomenal job. But Mark Briscoe is always the bridesmaid, never the bride here. And I think that they're really wasting an opportunity to give Mark Briscoe his moment, which AEW should have pulled the trigger on when Jay Briscoe was still alive, with the Briscoes showing up on AEW television in some form. I know they had a lot of problems initially of getting them on I believe it was TBS. It might be TNT, but I'm not sure which network it is, to be honest with you. And of course, they dropped the ball with that because of, stuff that was going on social media. And then, of course, rest in peace, Jay Briscoe. So now they got a chance to put Mark Briscoe on television, fire on all cylinders, and give him that moment. It doesn't have to be a long moment. He doesn't have to hold the AEW World Championship for 6 months, but just give the guy his moment. I think it would be emotional. The crowd is involved in him already because of the history of Mark Briscoe in professional wrestling, in Ring of Honor, and in the style of wrestling that AEW seems to really champion. Give him that moment is all I'm saying. I mean, they've already given him the Ring of Honor moments, but let's get it on a wider scale is my opinion. I'm a big Mark Briscoe fan. And just a note there, I was listening to Dominic D'Angelo's interview with Enzo Amore, and Enzo brought up the angle with the Briscoes and he and Big Bill that happened in Ring of Honor. Now, a match I would have loved to see would have been the Briscoes against Big Bill and Enzo Amore. So it got me thinking how cool it would be if Enzo showed up in AEW and confronted Mark Briscoe, like showed up in the crowd, similar to how he and Big Bill showed up in the crowd during the Briscoes match in Ring of Honor. I think it would be a good moment and a match that would generate lots of interest. However, given that Enzo has like certain feelings about AEW that he does not hold back, I'm not sure we'll see it anytime soon. But I'll tell you, I'd buy Enzo and Big Bill against the Bucks for $1. As long as it's a story and it's well told, and you can't teach that. All right, let's move on. I'm going to try and speak briefly about this because I did have some strong emotions about this. It started with Chris Statlander defeating Toni Storm for the AEW Women's World Championship. And after Chris Statlander wins, this match took a long time for the crowd to get invested in, by the way, which I think is a disservice to what they should have done with Chris Statlander in building her up as a champion, or at least building her up to be a formidable champion and somebody that the crowd really gets behind. They have not done a great job with Chris Statlander in that regard. And it even seems like now they've reset her back to factory settings and done the whole space, I'm an alien type of a theme that she started with, but they never really got a chance to firmly flesh out. So they went back to square one with Chris Statlander, and the crowd doesn't know how to respond to that. And I think that it's showing, which is not fair to Chris Statlander. And I think Chris Statlander, in my opinion, and this is not a slight to this, with all due respect, I enjoy her performances. She reminds me a lot of John Kronus. Okay, if you remember John Kronus, he was a part of the Eliminators with Perry Saturn. Now, who went on to have more fame, Perry Saturn or John Kronus? If your answer is Perry Saturn, then you are correct. Perry Saturn went on to the WCW, then he went on to the WWF, later the WWE, and he had a lot of fame there. John Kronus was always the guy that we thought was going to be a top star because he was 263 pounds and able to do 450 splashes and space flying tiger drops, but he never got that opportunity. And I think that Chris Statlander somehow has fallen into the John Kronus category and not the Perry Saturn category. And they need to find a way to get her into more of a program where the fans are emotionally invested in her and they do a chant for her, or they have merchandise that goes with her, something to rile the crowd up, because right now she's the AEW Women's World Champion, and she is looking like a secondary champion compared to Mercedes Moné. And this is furthered by Mercedes Moné coming out in the middle of Chris Statlander's celebration for beating the top star in the women's division in AEW and Toni Storm, and basically shooing her away, saying, "Get out of my ring." And Chris Statlander obliging. You can't do that to the AEW Women's Champion. She should have slapped Mercedes Moné, pushed Mercedes Moné, tried to go after Mercedes Moné and chase her around the ring. Something to establish that she is the champion. I would love a promo from Chris Statlander that says, "You have 17 belts." Titles, sorry, Robert Karpelis, if you're listening. You have 17 titles, and you can have 17 more, but you'll still never be on top of the women's division until you have this one. That's the promo that Chris Statlander needs to cut, and that's where she needs to come off as such. And without doing that, she comes across as a secondary champion, and Mercedes Moné seems like she's above her, even with all of these titles that are seemingly insignificant in the grand scope of things. You know, like the titles don't make the person makes the titles. And right now those titles don't mean anything. So what does that mean for the person in Ultimo Monet, right? So she comes out, has a match with Mina Shirakawa, and wins the Ring of Honor Women's Television Championship. Although that is the, I can't remember the name, the interim AEW Women's Television Championship, because Red Velvet is the current Women's Television Champion, but she is out injured. So Mina Shirakawa won the interim championship, which gives Monet the extra championship belt to further go on this tear of world dominating belt collector. And, you know, and then Chris Statlander comes out and she tries to get her heat back. But by then, I mean, it's just too late. I mean, they've got a hole in there creatively with Chris Statlander where she just seems inferior to Mercedes Moné. And now that there's going to be a match at Full Gear where Mercedes Moné is going to go after the AEW Women's World Champion, we all kind of feel like, even though we're rooting for Chris Statlander, it's all kind of apparent that Mercedes Moné is more than likely going to win. But you would love to see Chris Statlander actually get that win over Mercedes Moné and defeat her, considering that she's not putting a title up on the line from her collection. But we'll see how that all plays out. Yeah, they could have definitely reversed this order. Had Mercedes Moné come out, battle Mina Shirakawa, beat Mina Shirakawa, and then Chris Statlander comes out and shoos Mercedes Moné out of the ring, and then battles Toni Storm, and then have Mercedes Moné come out feeling disrespected and having the spotlight taken away from her and attacking Chris Statlander, I think would have been a way better opportunity, a way better moment if they would have gone in that direction. It seems like they went the opposite direction, and it did no favors to Chris Statlander, and that's my opinion. But we're going to move on. Brodito defeated Kazuchika Okada and Konosuke Takeshita. This is by far the match of the night, in my opinion. They almost went 30 minutes. This was a great match, back and forth. I love the story between Okada and Takeshita. The outcome never in question, although I would have liked to see Okada and Takeshita, you know, as tag team champions that didn't get along. I think that would have been a really fun storyline, but I see what they're doing. They're trying to fast-pace this match to the end of the year. I think we get this match either at Full Gear or at World's End. This match is coming, and it's coming up fast, and so I can't wait for them to really give us this opportunity. I think Okada's going to really need to step his game up for this match, and I think he will, by all accounts. I think that we are going to see that, so I am excited for what they're going to do there. I think the match was great, and it really stole the show, in my opinion. The crowd was really into it as well, which is what you want from a tag title match like that. They've really done a great job of reestablishing their tag division in AEW over this last few months, and I think that it's in tribute to Brody King and Bandito. They deserve a lot of that praise for building back the AEW tag team title division. So this was a great match of the night, by far. And Hangman Adam Page defeats Samoa Joe for the AEW World Championship. Now, this was back what I was talking about earlier with the Ops as the Trios champions going against the Hurt Syndicate. The reason why that makes sense is because Samoa Joe turns on Hangman Adam Page at the end there, attacks him, and seemingly the entire Ops go into most hated category, which I think is important because Samoa Joe is better as a heel, in my opinion. Also, the top of the card of heels is not looking so good right now for Hangman Adam Page. He doesn't have a pick of the litter of these top main event type heels to work with. So you've got Samoa Joe, you've got Kyle Fletcher, you've got MJF going away. He hasn't been back yet. And that's pretty much all you got at the top of the card that don't have titles already. And Kyle Fletcher has the TNT Championship. So there's not a whole lot for Hangman Adam Page to work with there. John Moxley is another one. Obviously, he's been working with Darby Allin. So, and you don't want to go back to that drawing. You don't want to go back to that well that soon after Hangman Adam Page has already beaten John Moxley. So, yeah, you don't really have a whole lot of options there. So I think Samoa Joe winning or turning into a most hated, and then eventually maybe beating Hangman Adam Page for the championship, so then Hangman Adam Page can fight to get that title back, I think might be the way to go here. You don't want to turn Samoa Joe into the most hated and then have him get that rematch against Hangman Adam Page for Hangman Adam Page to win again. Then it leaves Samoa Joe kind of squandering. But I don't know what their plan is here. Maybe they have a plan for Samoa Joe after that. hopefully they do, and this just wasn't a spontaneous turn to get the Ops to go against the Hurt Syndicate and establish a most hated fan favorite divide there. But we will see what happens on Wednesday and how they build that up going forward. This match was fine for what it was. It didn't stretch past the allotted time, in my opinion. It didn't go over its time. It stayed interesting. They hit all their moves. Samoa Joe still in phenomenal shape for his age and for how long he's been doing it, which is about, 26 years or something now. So amazing for Samoa Joe to still be at the top of his game like this. And he works really well with Hangman and Page. This was a hard-fought match. And the conclusion, like I said, was never in doubt. But I was pretty shocked by Samoa Joe turning heel. So we'll see what they do going forward with that. And finally, Jon Moxley against Darby Allin in the I Quit match. I've read some things about the Athletic Commission having problems in Missouri. So they had to work around a lot of craziness that they more than likely had planned, including some stuff with Fire, which they had been building towards for like a month, about Fire being involved in this I Quit match. They had to work around that because the State Athletic Commission in Missouri was not about all the violence and everything like that. And I wondered if it had to do with what happened with Owen Hart in Missouri, where he fell, and I don't want to bring that up, but it is something that could be a good talking point as far as like why the Athletic Commission is so like strict and restrictive as far as professional wrestling and the types of violence that display. I think that Moxley and Darby worked around it really well. There were a lot of cringe moments. There were a lot of like very high suspense, high anxiety moments, specifically with skewers. And when I saw the fish tank and the water going in, the tape trader in me automatically thought we were going to get Piranha. Now, whether they were gimmick Piranha or not, I thought that's what we were going to see. I thought that Moxley was going to fill that fish tank full of Piranha and shove Darby Allin's face into that Piranha pit. Now, that would have been insane, of course, but it's not something that I haven't seen before. For those that have been into Big Japan Pro Wrestling, if you know, you know. I've definitely gone down those rabbit holes, and I have seen some crazy stuff. So that wouldn't have been without a question, especially if they would have put his hand in, and his hand would have come up all bloody. I could have definitely seen them doing something like that, but they didn't. They went with the more drowning aspect here. Now, Sting shows up after Claudio Castagnoli beats Darby from pillar to post. He throws him over the top rope and launches him over the announce table. Then Pac drags Darby Allin's like lifeless carcass over to two tables, and Moxley drives him through the tables. Like, that was an insane pace that they had for that. Darby did not have a chance to breathe, nor did he have a chance to breathe when they filled the fish tank full of water and shoved his head in it numerous times. So eventually the lights go out. Sting shows up and hands the bat to Darby Allin after he smashes the fish tank, mind you, because that is a very important point that I'm going to bring up a little bit later. So, and then Sting walks away into the darkness, having helped Darby Allin here. Now, after Sting smashed the fish tank, what ended up happening was Darby Allin repeatedly hits Jon Moxley with the baseball bat. He hits him in the stomach, in the back, and then in the top of the leg, the bottom, the back of the knee, and then a little portion of his right leg. I think it might have been his right leg, and then hits him in the Scorpion Deathlock, and without a microphone, mind you, because every I Quit match that I can ever remember, the referee has a microphone so that we can audibly hear the opponent or the person say, "I quit." They did not have a microphone, but we took the word for the referee when he said that Moxley said, "I quit." He didn't tap out. He didn't submit. He said the words, "I quit." Now, after Sting smashed the fish tank with the bat and the shards were still sticking out of the top of the fish tank, I figured Darby was going to position Mox for insertion of that glass shard that was sticking out, and then makes him say, "I quit," so he's not stabbed in the eye or the forehead or the throat or something crazy like that. Now, obviously, that would have been really, really close to murder, but the crowd was already chanting, "This is murder," when Moxley was drowning Darby Allin in the fish tank. So it's not unheard of that we would have built to this point. The level of violence that we had in previous matches with Moxley and Darby, I would have expected an extreme level of violence outside of Darby threatening Renee Paquette, which is what I had predicted to happen, which I thought would have been more of a tame route and would have given Moxley that emotional connection so that he says, I quit, to protect his wife, which then establishes her as a weakness, or his weakness even. But they did not go that route, and they didn't go that extreme route where Darby threatens to basically kill Moxley, because that is what they've built to this point. They've tried to throw each other on fire, run each other with cars, suffocate each other in caskets, and all this stuff. Like, they've tried it all. I felt like the only build that we had outside of a gun or a knife being used was something like that, like a smashed fish tank, and Darby trying to skewer, trying to impale Moxley, so he has to say, I quit. That's where I thought it was going. They did the Scorpion Deathlock move, which I think was kind of like anticlimactic, to say the very least. Now, if the things are true about the State Athletic Commission, then I understand, and it makes a whole lot of sense. They definitely teased using fire, but they never did bring fire into the equation in this match. And if it is because of their restrictions for the State Athletic Commission, that would make a lot of sense. But again, this is just rumor and innuendo and conjecture in my point, because I've read a few things about it, but I don't know if it was actually true. This was pretty much a letdown, though, considering what they had been building up for. And that's coming from somebody that's not all into that gruesome deathmatch stuff anymore. I was when I was a kid. I'm not really into it that much anymore. But hey, that's what they were building, man. So I know there's going to be a lot of people that were expecting one thing, and then they got that, and I'm sure they're going to feel a little let down in that. But Darby did win. He did finally get his win. Tommy Dreamer finally beats Raven at Wrestledream. All right, that's it for me, you guys. Let me know what you guys think. Leave it down in the comments below. Thanks for listening. If you've been checking it out this long, I really appreciate you. You guys are real ones. Thumbs up on the way out, you guys. Don't forget, if you haven't already, hit the subscription button. It's a handshake agreement we have between you and I. We'll shake hands on it. You shake my hand. I'll make sure that I provide great content for you and my theories on professional wrestling and the product. And I'll shake your hand, and you promise to subscribe to my channel, hit the notifications bell so you always know when the videos are coming along, and tell a friend to tell a friend, because you never know when I'm coming out of the portal of pro wrestling to drop you with the hotness. This has been the Wrestling Old Head. Thanks again, you guys. Stay tuned for more as always, and I'll see you in the next one.